All right. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their culture. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and each can, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We would also like to offer our support to anyone affected by the attacks on Ukraine. We stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Abigail Bonington, and I am the moderator for this evening's discussion. I'm from Annapolis, Royal Nova Scotia, and I'm in my 4th year of environmental engineering at Dalhousie University. I'm honored to welcome you all to tonight's panel discussion on engineering during a pandemic. This is part of the Dalhousie's Women of Today series hosted by Dalhousie's Women in Engineering Society, which brings together youth, students, faculty, alumni, and the public to explore the perceptions of women in engineering. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic over 2 years ago, we've all experienced a huge shift in the way we think and go about our lives. We moved classes, clubs, jobs, and socialization online, often missing out on key opportunities for collaboration and connection with family, colleagues, and peers. While trying to adjust to the new normal, many of us also had to cope with the loss of loved ones whose presence will always be missed. However, the pandemic has also given an unprecedented opportunity for innovation and cooperation as the world has worked together to combat a common virus. Alongside the medical sciences, engineering has played a key role in lessening the impact of COVID-19. We've come up with new online collaboration platforms that allow people to work together when they cannot meet in person, models to predict future virus spread, new personal protective equipment and air filtration mechanisms, and new ways of testing for and delivering preventative measures against the virus, to name a few. Tonight, we will discuss with our 3 panelists how their lives have changed during the pandemic and ways that they have seen the engineering community rise to the occasion. So we're pleased to introduce our 3 panelists this evening, Tyra Oberdan, Jane Farr, and Dr. Amina Stoddard. So first, our first panelist is Tyra Oberdan, a grade 11 IB high school student at Sydney Academy. Tyra has been involved in various STEM-based activities, including Imhotep's Young, Gifted, and Black Science Fair, where she completed a research project on racial disparities in the detection of breast cancer. Tyra is also a member of her school's women's group, where they discuss important subjects such as women in STEM. Next, we have Jade. So Jade is a 4th year engineering student at Dalhousie University. She's graduating in December of 2022 with a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering and a certificate in Biomedical Engineering. She has been recognized for her leadership abilities as one of the founding students to receive the Dean's Leadership List. Jade has had a variety of industry experience in the renewable energy sector, as well as the telematics and defense security industry. Lastly is Dr. Amina Stoddard. She is an engineer and assistant professor in the Center for Water Resources at Dalhousie University. Her research seeks to improve contaminant removal from water and wastewater through the development of detection methods, application of novel treatment technologies, and advancement of process optimization approaches. Recently, Amina's team has focused research efforts on the detection and surveillance of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater to help support the pandemic response measures. Welcome to all of you. Now, throughout the event, I encourage you, our viewers, to post your questions online. We're streaming on both YouTube and Facebook Live, and we'll bring any questions posted in the comments forward during an engaging Q&A with our panelists. There will be a prize drawn for the book, Women of the Pandemic, Stories from the Frontlines of COVID-19 by Lauren McKeon after the event, for those who ask questions. So ask away. Now let's get into it with our first question for the panelists. We will begin with Tyra. So Tyra, tell us about your involvement with engineering and STEM.
Well, I'm currently enrolled in the IB diploma, as was said before. And in my IB diploma, I take IB chemistry and IB physics. And I also took academic physics this year. And so I picked science subjects because, I have a lot of family members that are involved in the STEM fields. And I think it's important, like, it's a huge gateway to learning about life and how things work around us. As was said before, I was also a part of Imhotep's Young Black and Gifted Science Fair, and I won third place at that. And then I moved on to the CBSN Youth Phase 1 competition through Imhotep for my same research project. And I got a seniors award in like a founders award for an outstanding senior science fair proposal. And I'm moving on to the Phase 2, which will be later in April. And I was also a finalist at the Connector International Film Festival because last year I made a film about women and girls in tech and the workplace and everything. And I've also been to a lot of science camps, and I was in Imhotep STEM competitions, and I've attended a lot of online events about STEM.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Tyra, and best of luck in April. It sounds exciting. So I'm going to ask the same question now to Jade. So Jade, tell us about your involvement with engineering and STEM.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Jade, and I actually wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to go into engineering in the beginning. And I actually had a call from someone at Dalhousie, an female engineering student, and she had called me and said, "Oh, I heard you were accepting the program. Congratulations. Are you coming to Dalhousie?" And I said, yes, but I wasn't sure at the moment if I wanted to pursue engineering. So she really sold me on that. And it's funny because I did call people, I guess, the next year, the year after that, doing the same thing. So it's a full circle. I love that they did that. And that was the seller point for me. But in terms of the STEM courses, I really enjoyed that it was you understanding the concepts. And it wasn't a lot of memorization. So, as engineers, we're problem solvers, and we don't need to memorize a specific process in order to solve these problems because there's so much creativity in engineering, and you can create I guess any process that you want to do. I mean, depending on your constraints, of course, and your requirements. But yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, the way I looked at it in terms of all of these STEM courses or specifically engineering courses. And I guess on Sexton campus, I was leading a diploma society. So that's the Dalhousie Diploma Engineering Society. And that's kind of one of the bigger involvements I was on Sexton campus, as well as the project manager of the Dalhousie Microtransat Autonomous Civil team. So that's another design team on Sexton campus. So these involvements have given me lots of opportunities. So it's been great. Being involved on campus is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Jade.
Thanks for having
me. And finally, I'm going to address the question to Amina. So Amina, tell us about your involvement with engineering and STEM.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for the invitation to join this panel. I think this is such a cool concept and a cool opportunity and a cool structure. So I think this will be really fun. So as you said, I'm a professor in the Department of Civil and Resource Engineering, and I work within what's called the Center for Water Resources Studies. So that's all at Dalhousie. So as a professor, I'm involved in sort of engineering education. So I teach third, fourth, and graduate level engineering courses, mostly related to, or totally related to drinking water treatment and domestic wastewater treatment, which is kind of my research specialty. So also as a professor, I work with a team or lead a team of researchers that are composed of mostly engineers. We have some undergrads in our group too, so our EITs. And this team is made up of students, so undergraduate students, graduate students. We have some different staff, so engineers and scientists. And so as a team, we We work in collaboration actually with, other professors, so other academics. We work with water and wastewater utilities, so things like, Halifax Water might be familiar, and different private companies to address really water and wastewater treatment challenges kind of within our communities. So it's a really collaborative approach, which is really exciting. And these challenges, they range from, research focused on developing maybe, new methods to, understand chemical and biological contaminants. So like things like microplastics. We're still trying to figure out, methods to measure microplastics in water, and specifically wastewater is a really complex matrix. So, and other sort of optimization studies to try to, make our infrastructure kind of work for us better and achieve, better standards and things like that. So looking at improving treatment processes to really just achieve better water quality, maybe at the tap if we're talking about drinking water, or if we're talking about maybe a wastewater treatment process, the water that's treated and then, sort of returned to the environment. So both teaching and research is kind of my focus.
That's awesome. I'm glad to say I've had the pleasure of taking one of your courses, which is very good. All right. Thank you so much, Amina. And I'm actually going to keep you here because I'm going to address my second question to you first. So how has COVID-19 changed things for you in your workplace and or school? And what do you think the lasting effects of COVID-19 will be on STEM education?
Yeah. So, the pandemic, it's brought out a lot of challenges, obviously. In the workplace, the switch to online and online course instruction and research meetings, it was really, an incredible challenge. As an instructor trying to keep engagement, I know that the students really felt those challenges of moving online, and we still feel them to some regard too. So try to keep engagement and really just learn how to communicate in that new mode. And then, as well at the onset of the pandemic and at different times through different waves, our research would be paused at different times for safety reasons. Or we couldn't maybe be in the lab or be at any of our field sites, which was challenging for our students and challenging for our partners to kind of keep our research goals alive. But there have been, a lot of positives too, I think. Or we can find silver linings, I guess. We've learned to work really collaboratively online. I think we've kind of, mastered Teams and mastered Zoom and those kinds of things, as much as we joke about how, we're sick of them. But we've mastered those and we've kind of learned to use them and learn the advantage of them. So which has allowed really, I found with our team, have, more flexible work schedules. We can, more easily accommodate team members who might be, in the field doing work or on a research site doing work, like maybe at a water treatment plant. We have, maybe more effective structures, I guess, for sharing some of our data and our findings. We've done a lot with kind of online dashboards for data visualization that will eventually kind of help us, I think, share data, and our research results internally, and certainly have helped internally, but hopefully will help us move to pushing some of our research to be more accessible to the public to see as well. And then I think some of these positives, I think, will still remain. This knowledge that we can have this hybrid mode of working that in some cases can maybe even increase engagement and reach wider audiences, I think is really wonderful. I've reflected on it a little bit. While we can't, go to research conferences and meet with our colleagues, we can maybe join various, webinars and presentations and meetings with researchers, in several different countries kind of in one day, which it certainly doesn't beat that in-person mode, but there are certainly, some efficiencies there where you could, cross time zones and countries and things like that to connect with people where we kind of have more familiarity with this online mode. So I think that's one of the positives.
Yeah, for sure. Flexibility with online is a big thing. Well, thank you for that, Amina. And now, Jade, I'm going to pose the same question to you. So how has COVID-19 changed things for you in your workplace and or school? And what do you think the lasting impacts of COVID-19 will be on STEM education?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to complete 2 co-ops. So I do have a little bit of industry experience. So I guess from a student point of view, when you're in your classes, a lot of students struggled finding and securing a co-op. So that would have been in March of 2020. So that summer term, it was very difficult for some students to secure a co-op. And, I've had friends at that time that were saying, they didn't know if there was going to be work for the students. They didn't know if they could confirm the funding for the students. So unfortunately, some students weren't able to find a co-op placement, but I don't think they were penalized. Don't quote me on that. So I guess for them, finding the co-op and then moving to that online transition. So we talk about it a lot, but there are a lot of mental health change. Like, I guess the change to go to online mentally is so different. So I guess as a student, for some of them or most of us, we're in our bedrooms. So there's not a big difference between you waking up, getting ready, and then going to campus or going to your class. You're waking up and you might be moving 5 or 6 steps to your desk. So I think that's a huge shift, and making sure that your work environment is something that you like being around in and you like working in that environment. So I think that's also a huge shift that you saw in students, and ensuring that you had that proper work from home, school from home setup. So that was also really important. And then I guess similar to what was said, having those online classes. So making sure you understand how to utilize Collaborate or Teams, and having those online classes is definitely a shift. So you may not be able to ask a professor after class in person a question. You're raising your hand on the mic, or just turning off your mic saying, "Oh, do you mind staying? I have a quick question," or you're texting in the chat. So that was a little different. And then having, of course, those online office hours, or something else that was different. But in terms of, I think, from an industry standpoint, as a co-op student, sometimes it was difficult to network. So depending on how big your company was, in my experience, we kind of had to stay within our buildings, and stay within our sub teams. So I guess for a student as well, networking events weren't as big, especially in the beginning of COVID. And we're really fortunate that things are looking good, and we've been slowly having more and more in-person networking events. But over the past 2 years, there's definitely been a decrease. And networking is so important, especially for those students in the co-op program that want to meet these employers and that want to have those conversations. And I guess vice versa, companies want to build a stronger team and have those team building events. And with COVID and recommending everyone stay within their building, within their sub team, you're unable to do that. And it's an online collaboration. And that's what I've experienced as a co-op student. We've had online meetings within different sub teams instead of in person. So that was a little different. And then I guess as a co-op student, another thing I had a lot of tasked a lot was to find all these missing components. So I'm sure a lot of co-op students have also done the same. Your supervisor provides you a list of different components that they'd like you to search up. And again, with COVID, the increase of, I guess the demand was a lot higher for all of these different components. So you see an increase in price, and then you also see unavailability. So that's why we're looking for these missing components. Manufacturers are having a hard time doing the turnaround as quick as the demand is. So that was something else that I've noticed within the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jade. I can definitely see that COVID has had a huge impact on co-op terms for sure. So Tyra, I'm going to bring you up now. How has COVID-19 changed things for you in your workplace and or school? And what do you think the lasting effects of COVID-19 will be on STEM education?
So for me as a high school student, it's definitely that very prominent that COVID-19 has affected us because we're like kind of the younger ones in society. Like a lot of our teachers have even told us that there's a lot of things that we missed out on, me being in grade 11 now, that we haven't done over the past 2 years. So I think that some of the things that could affect our STEM education is that we have less hands-on learning than we did, let's say 2 years ago when I was in grade 9. I remember going on field trips and like being able to go to science camp and being able to go and watch people speak and things like that. But we haven't really done anything like that in 2 whole years. And so another thing for us was transitioning to online learning. It left like, especially when I was in grade 9 in March of 2020, it was like a big gap in everything. Like, we were kind of told that like our grades didn't matter. So nothing would change, our grades wouldn't change. So I feel like everybody kind of left school behind and we just focused on something else. Like, we were focused on like worrying about the pandemic and everything that was going on around us. And so even when we went into grade 10, our teachers like told us like, oh, we missed like 2 whole units and now we're like in a pre-IB course in science and we're kind of missing some fundamental knowledge that was needed for the course. But I think that like our teachers did like a good job to try and like catch us up. And another thing is that being in a high school, a lot of students are overwhelmed already with everything that goes on, especially once you go to like the senior grades. And the pandemic caused a lot of anxiety, and that adds kind of onto everything that we already have to do, like keep up with your extracurriculars, and once you get to grade 12, university and college applications, and it was just a lot to think about, like having to plan everything around the pandemic instead of being able to do everything as you wanted to do it and everything. And there was just a lot of social experiences that we missed out on. I would say like school dances, like even just regular school functions, like whatever it was, we missed out on a lot of things and a lot of, getting to know our school. We only really had, I would say, 9 months at the beginning of grade 9 to get to know our school and like everything that went on in it. And then all of a sudden everything changed. And like it's kind of been like our new normal. Like I feel like I have some teachers I've never seen their faces before that like I started with in grade 10 and I've never seen their faces before, and it's really strange. And one thing that I also worry about is that kind of the newer grades coming in, like they're being thrown into this new environment, and it has to be hard to like come into the school and it's like you can't even see your teacher's face or anything. You can't go to a school game or anything, although now it's opening up and everything. But before it was online, there was really nothing that like the new students in high school could come in and be like, okay, yeah, we're going to welcome you to the school. Like all the freshmen fresh weeks, they were kind of like dulled down, so everything was just dulled down for us. And another major thing that I think was that the anxiety of the pandemic was there, and I think that people were starting to come to school less because of the fact that they were afraid of catching COVID. And like it definitely makes sense as to why people would have anxiety over that, because I mean, it was really an unknown virus, especially to us as like younger kids. Like we don't go that deep into everything. Like, they tell us, okay, wash your hands, do this, do that. But at the end of the day, like we see the news, we know the things that are happening in the world. So a lot of people might not be okay with opening up about that to an adult. So they might just keep it inside and, be afraid at school, like not want to go to school and things like that. So yeah, I think it will definitely leave some lasting effects on school education and STEM education, because a huge part of that is hands-on learning and, seeing other people and cooperating with other people that you may not know. And yeah, that's
Yeah, thank you for that, Tyra. Labs and hands-on learning are definitely more difficult when everyone's doing it from home, for sure. So I am going to pose my third question to you first of all. It is, have you benefited from COVID-19 in any way? If so, please tell us in which ways.
Well, I think that like in a lot of things that we do during the pandemic, it's kind of a less grueling process because like people understand the difficulties of, doing things during a pandemic, and everything transitioning to online was definitely beneficial. Like, I did a lot of things that it's possible that I wouldn't have done, like, if it was just everything physically. And yeah, a lot of events and activities I feel like were kind of just less work to put into to be able to get something. And I think it opened up opportunities by the fact that people felt more comfortable to do things online rather than in person, because it was easier to do things from your home.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good point. You have an opportunity to diversify somewhat
Yeah.
thanks to the pandemic. All right. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Jade now. So, Jade, have you benefited from COVID-19 in any way? And if so, please tell us in which ways.
Yeah, so I think something for all students, we've become better at managing our time. So, when you're online, you don't have professors telling you every class or every 3 days, every 2 days, oh, you have this assignment due, or we have this coming up, or so on. So, it's really important that you manage your time. And in engineering or any program regardless, you should be, but I think that's something that we've all become stronger at doing on our own, and kind of holding ourselves accountable, because we don't have someone we see every day telling us what we have to remember to do. And your profs usually do that, which is always nice. The other benefit that I also was thinking of is having that option of online and in person. So as a co-op student, I did have that option. So that's something the industry has also had. But as a student, having the option of in person and online is great. So depending on if for some reason you can't attend in person, you still have the option to go to class and still learn the material, which is great. So I've been really fortunate to have some professors that have given us the opportunity to choose what learning style or what class that you wanted to attend. But yeah, so that, and also becoming more independent. So I didn't mention this before, but I still had labs online. And we purchased kits and we did all of our labs from home. So it was challenging because you couldn't go into lab, but it forced you to complete the labs, but you didn't have a lab instructor, you didn't have a TA available at hand. You really had to figure out the work on your own. Of course, they were there for you via email or call if you really wanted to Teams call them, but being able to do that work on your own. So, becoming independent, that was also something that is great. And then being adaptable. So that's something that I think we've all become stronger as students, because all of these different changes that we are constantly having with these restrictions, as well as sometimes professors will do in-person lectures only and some will do online from my experience. So being adaptable, because some weeks aren't always the same as others, or in my case they weren't. And then finally, being able to review those lectures. So as I had mentioned, you don't have to memorize a lot in engineering. It's more of you understanding the concepts, which is great. But when you're in person and now, you're writing really fast as the professor is lecturing, or if they have the slides up. So being able to replay those lectures, I mean, they post the slides, but it's different when they're talking about the concepts. Being able to replay the lecture and slow down to the specific section that you want to review was awesome. And I've been really fortunate that some professors still are doing that for us. And some of them do see the value of being able to replay their words and the way they explain the different concepts. I guess in terms of the industry, you see a lot of projects, or I would assume there'd be a lot of projects ensuring that there's proper air ventilation in the different systems. So, in the beginning of COVID, it would always stay 6 feet apart from people, wear a mask, and you wanted to make sure that you maintain that distance. So having the proper air ventilation system. So you just want to make sure that, I guess, all of that is in check. So my assumption that there would be an increase of projects or just different companies that wanted to ensure that their building met that standard, and that they were able to do that well, I guess, in any building, not necessarily companies, but yeah.
Yeah, those are very good points. I can relate especially to the adaptability. A pandemic has been very good for exercising my planning brain.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to turn to Amina and ask her the same thing. So Amina, have you benefited from COVID-19 in any way? And if so, in which ways?
Yeah, I guess I'll maybe pick up on kind of what Jade said, where there's maybe different projects that weren't really maybe on the horizon for engineers, or maybe we're longer out than you would have thought. So one of the things that our research group was actually kind of able to find this really a completely new area of research where we could apply some of our skills. So in early summer 2020, we began doing what's called wastewater surveillance. So wastewater surveillance for SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. So you may have heard a bit about this recently. Every once in a while, it's sort of in the news as a possibility for pandemic response. But basically, people who are infected with COVID-19, they actually shed their virus in their waste. And as environmental engineers, perhaps fortunately or unfortunately, we're very familiar with the collection of wastewater and sewers and then the transmission of that wastewater, to your wastewater treatment facility where it can be treated and then sort of discharged back into the environment. So we began taking samples of this wastewater in areas in the sewer system and at some of the wastewater treatment plants, and measuring it for the virus material, and then using that to sort of quantify or infer whether the number of sort of infected individuals in a community was kind of increasing or decreasing. So sort of a way wastewater surveillance was kind of touted at the time, and still is maybe a way to understand this increase and decrease in cases without maybe having to do clinical testing, especially I think with early variants, maybe where people were maybe asymptomatic and maybe transmitting the virus without really knowing, and maybe not getting tested, or maybe where there were limited tests available too, right? Where when COVID first appeared, we didn't really have wide scale PCR testing and things like that. So it could be useful there. Or then, of course, when Omicron hit, and then from a sort of material standpoint, we kind of brought back the testing and weren't testing as much. Wastewater can test kind of a lot of individuals, or a large area of individuals with sort of this kind of one test. So so it was really cool for our team. We were able to kind of apply our environmental engineering knowledge, but to kind of a health-based, and provide information that could be used for health decision making. So the work was really interesting, because it was a multidisciplinary work where you have sort of the environmental engineers doing work, and we developed methods to detect the virus in wastewater, which was kind of a complex, different matrix than some of the clinical testing that was done, and a very interesting matrix to work with, obviously. And then environmental engineers, we were kind of the ones that understood the sewer network and kind of where to test, where to take samples in terms of how the wastewater was flowing, and so what communities we were capturing when we were taking a sample at a kind of specific kind of point in the system. And then we were able to work collaboratively with microbiologists and epidemiologists and people that are more familiar with bioinformatics than we are, and to understand the data and what detections mean, and in terms of prevalence of disease within a community, or even occurrence of variants of concern. So that's been really exciting for our team, I think, to be involved in that field, and the field really didn't exist before the pandemic, right? There was some research in the area for some different, but it really exploded with COVID-19. And so there are a lot of wastewater surveillance programs now. And I think it will only, certainly hopefully COVID-19 will be behind us at some point, or be less of a, sort of a presence in our lives. But I think wastewater surveillance, it just kind of opens up this door of all the information that we could gather from wastewater that could be used to, support public health. So we've been thinking about other analytes that we might be able to analyze in wastewater that could, help us understand influenza and things like that, other diseases and other infections and things like that we could, get more information about our communities and then have that without sort of a lot of clinical testing, which we've seen with COVID-19.
It's good to know that there's a use for poop.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, I'm coming to the end of my prepared questions here, which is going to be a little different, as I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give some advice to the others. So first off, I'm going to start with Amina. Do you have any advice for your undergraduate self working towards an engineering degree as Jade is now?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. I would say when I was thinking about, myself and what I was like at that time, and I would say to just, kind of keep making, those incremental choices that help you work toward whatever big picture you have for yourself. So I know during my undergrad, personally, I was inspired really early in my undergrad degree to pursue research. I was really inspired by one of my professors at Acadia. I went to Acadia first and then did the rest of my undergrad at Dal. So Dr. Jenny Rand, I don't think that maybe I recognized it at the time, but it was certainly for me at the time really powerful to see a woman in engineering with a PhD who I could relate to, and I could see myself in her, I guess. And so after meeting her, I was like, I want a PhD. I am going into research. I think she's just the coolest person that I have ever met. And I want to be just like her. And so I worked in her lab for a summer as a research assistant. And then sort of from there on out, I kind of made, I guess, every education or work sort of choice with the hopes of kind of working my way to be this PhD, which maybe at the time I didn't quite know what it all meant, but I thought that I wanted to be, a professor, and I wanted to do research. And so I guess kind of right from that first year of undergrad, I sort of had maybe a long-term and maybe distant sort of big picture for what I wanted to be, I guess. And sometimes it meant I had to do things that maybe were outside of my comfort zone, or but those are kind of the things that, kind of push you, as you have this sort of vision for yourself, however, abstract, and maybe you don't even know what it entails to do a PhD. And I don't think I did at that time, but so I guess I would say, just be true to yourself and what you want, and try to find and maintain that, whatever that vision is that you sort of have of your future self, and sort of do those, daily things that kind of help you get there. And, sometimes they'll be super exciting, learning a new skill, or, things you're celebrating, like landing a new job or something like that. But, oftentimes they're just those routine things, like taking care of yourself and your mental health, or, your mundane things like studying for your test and those kinds of things. But they're all kind of putting you on that path to whatever your big picture for yourself is. So I think, try to see that picture and find that pathway to it, I guess, however mundane or little steps and those daily steps, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amina. So now, Jade, do you have any advice for yourself as you entered university and prepared to take STEM-based courses as Tyra is now?
Yeah, so I guess, as I had mentioned in the beginning, when I first started figuring out what I wanted to do after high school, I didn't know. And that's okay. A lot of people do not know. And it's a huge decision that you need to make. So don't feel pressured to make a decision easily. And I think going into the program now, I should have done was more research. So maybe, you know, if you want to pursue engineering specifically, do your research. And, you know, if you see yourself kind of in that career related field, then go for it. And I think, you know, when you finish high school, there's four or five different paths. Like you have your sciences with engineering included, your arts, business, trades. The list goes on and on. But I think once you kind of figure out that, okay, it is STEM, the rest will come to you as you go. And I think it's also really important to put yourself out there. So I guess it's always an advice that you're going to use and you're giving to other people, but networking is so important, and getting involved is also important. All of these connections and all of these opportunities that I've had really have been formed through just networking and getting involved and meeting these people. And I'm really fortunate that the people that I was involved with these different societies with are some of the friends that I would consider lifelong friends that I'll have for a long time. And then through those also involvements, I've networked with all of these different companies and different representatives, and it helped me it did help me get some of my co-op placements. So I've had two of our sponsors from a design team that I've run that I've now secured co-ops with. So, you know, having that involvement, in networking, it can lead to some doors. So keep all of your options open. So I guess circling back to that, not knowing what you want to do is okay. You'll learn as you go. And lucky with Dalhousie, your first 2 years are general. And for me specifically, I learned that I wanted to pursue electrical or that discipline from those base courses. So your first 2 years are general, and you can tell within those courses what you do and what you do not like. So you'll get a better idea those first 2 years. And then again, getting involved, meeting all of those people can give you friends that'll last you a lifetime, and then networking. So Dalhousie offers all of these different networking opportunities, especially the Faculty of Engineering. I constantly see the Melda Murray Center putting on all of these awesome events, and this different societies as well hosting these events. So going to these events and meeting these new people, it's always great. So I think those are my two biggest things that I would definitely do if I was going into university again, and managing your time. But that's something you also learn as well as you go. So still something I'm learning.
Thank you so much for that, Jade. I would very much give similar advice, I have to say. So that's awesome. Now, Tyra, do you have any advice for educators such as a minor?
Well, I would definitely say that overall, I think it should kind of be reiterated to like my generation about how important our education is. And I think that sometimes we just forget by being caught up in other things like extracurriculars and all that. And social media is a big one, definitely. And I think that we kind of just sometimes just need to be like re-steered like in the back in the correct direction. And I think like it's just important for our teachers to remind us like this is gonna affect you in the future. Like, it's like it's high school, but like it's still like important to build a foundation. And also, another thing is that getting like test results and grades that aren't as good as like you feel that you could have done, or you think just they don't determine your worth. Like I think that a lot of people, especially in kind of the age level I am now, they base all of their like self-worth on their grades. And I think that that's really like self-harmful, because like it's like, okay, you tried hard, so you can't try harder. And it makes it seem like you've done the best to your limit when really you can do more, you can do better. And it's could just be a circumstantial thing that you didn't do well that day, and that you really shouldn't like bring it all down on yourself. And I also think, yeah, it's just hard for younger students as well when you're like going into like a new environment and everything. And I think it's good to be encouraged that like a lot of people, like even the teachers themselves, were like in this position at once. Like, we all had to go through these things and we had to learn about, dealing with extracurriculars at the same time as doing schoolwork and everything.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tyra. It can definitely be easy to feel somewhat disconnected from your work during these COVID times and what it all really means.
Yeah.
So now I would like to ask each of you if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share. So if we'll start with Tyra.
Well, I do think it's incredibly important that we, like me, my generation as young girls, that we learn about the different educational careers set out for us. Like, I definitely think that engineering is not something that's highly advertised to us, like at all. And like even like with the like growing like we want women to be in STEM, like engineering is definitely not something that I hear about a lot that is talked about for women to get into. And I think that it's really important that we focus on that and we highlight that and we show other people that we as girls, we can do this as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sometimes it feels like engineering can be a default degree for males if they aren't sure what they're going into, but for females it takes a little bit more searching for sure. So Jade, same question to you. Do you have any final remarks before we move into the Q&A? Oh,
okay. I guess circling back, one thing I will mention, I guess, in this COVID pandemic situation that I didn't think of saying before, but just being respectful and understanding that everyone has different comfort levels. And I don't think we talked about this, but it really, when you're dealing with these situations and you're in your classes, and even outside of your classes, some people have different comfort levels of what they're comfortable with in terms of social distancing, making sure that you follow the government guidelines in gathering and all of the isolation, or if you've been exposed. And I think during these past 2 years, it's been a lot of learning for people in terms of understanding and respecting how people are, I guess, going about this. So that's something I did mention. And then I guess the piece of advice I would say, I had this way back when I first started engineering, but it says tough times don't last, but tough people do. Maybe I didn't word that correctly, but generally I always keep that in my mind. So if I'm going through a tough time, I'm like, okay, it's a tough time, but it's not something that will last my lifetime. It's just a tough time in this moment. So I think making sure that you understand that it's just a certain situation or a certain time, and then being excited and being ready and knowing that you can change and it'll be positive and you don't have to stay in a negative mindset, and having that open mindset is important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's some very wise words. Now, Amina, I'd like to ask you the same thing. Do you have any final thoughts before we open to the public questions? Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, there we go.
I started too fast. Yeah, I think one of the things I was reflecting on was, engineering is so cool. There's something for everyone in engineering. Like, are you interested in cars or water or, the atmosphere, buildings, bridges? Like, there's just something for everyone in engineering. And I think that's just one of the really cool things. We have so many, engineering disciplines, and the work can span so widely that I think the work that's available to engineers and sort of the diverse problems that engineers can help solve, that there's a career path through an engineering education for just so many people. And I think I wouldn't have thought as an environmental engineer that that I'd be, sampling wastewater for SARS-CoV-2. Like that was never sort of in the plan. And so I think, engineers, we get these sort of diverse skill sets. And as I think Jade said, we're trained as these problem solvers, and we can find ourselves in so many interesting, working on so many interesting problems and just spanning everything. So I think if you're interested in engineering, you're interested in solving problems, there's an engineering discipline for you and a space for you through a career for you through an engineering education. I think it's just a great, stepping stone to anything. So yeah, if you're thinking about it, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. You never know where engineering will take you, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we are having a few questions come in from people who are watching. The first one I'm going to ask to Jade and then Amina. And it is, what was a difficult situation you faced during your engineering education, and how did you overcome it? Oh. Was that a move for the whole question? Jade is also muted. Okay, never mind. I'm going to review that. Thank you, Amina.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. So we have questions coming in from the public, and I'm going to address the first one to Jade and then Amina. So it is, what was a difficult situation you faced during your engineering education, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I think COVID in general, I'll say something else as well, but COVID has definitely made, I guess, my engineering education difficult. At times, I don't even remember sometimes, like the courses I took in the last year online, it just doesn't seem real. I don't know. So I think it definitely has impacted my education. I was really upset not being able to do in-person labs. And I really enjoy having that hands-on experience. And I think it really depends on the person and how you learn. So sometimes people are more hands-on, whereas others can learn, I guess, in more discussion. But as a hands-on learner, like that was something that I really missed. So that definitely impacted my education and having those hands-on skills. I guess everyone that has had to complete online labs, that's definitely impacted our learning. And then I guess another difficult situation outside of the pandemic is not doing or not performing as well as I would like to on different assessments. And I think it's really important when you're faced with that and you have that and you're like, oh, I didn't do as great as I wanted to. It's the way you respond to it. And how is you as a student, like, what do you want to do about it? So personally, I take that and then I try my best to learn from my situations and figure out, okay, what did I do wrong? Where can I improve? What are my resources? And what do I need to do? So to really motivate myself and have that drive and the ambition to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow one difficult situation impact my overall experience or my overall goal. So I think ensuring that when you respond to a failure or respond to something and it wasn't as great as you wanted to, having that drive and that ambition and making sure that you stay focused to the bigger picture and not being so focused on the little things.
Yeah, that's right. Perspective is a very important thing to learn. So Amina, what difficulties did you face during your engineering education and how did you overcome them?
I think I'll echo Jade's comment, because I was thinking, early in my undergrad, had a few courses that just were very challenging for me, and I didn't perform as well as I hoped, or as well as sort of my history I'd been had a certain vision for how good of a student I was, and those courses sort of reshaped that, I guess, if you will. And so I remember some of those early courses thinking, oh, okay, engineering is not for me, because, you know, I wasn't good at differential equations or something like that. And that's not true. If I'd stopped engineering I haven't seen a differential equation in quite some time now, and I hope not to see one for a while. So it's not something that, one course, don't look at it and say, oh, like I can't hack this, right? There's always, in everything, there's something that, you know, is sort of your challenge, and that's
nemesis.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, that's why I say engineering is exciting. It's for everybody. Anybody can find something in engineering that resonates with them, or through an engineering education, a job or a challenge or a opportunity that resonates for them. And, you know, something as small as one course or 2 courses or 5 courses, that shouldn't hold you back from whatever it is you want to do, because you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you just gotta push through it and get to the next exciting thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, our second question, I'm going to address to Tyra first and then Jade. So Amina spoke about her professor that was a role model for her, and our viewer is curious as to whether either of you were also influenced by strong female role models, and if you could share some of those experiences. So Tyra first.
Yeah, well, actually, I do have like a female, actually, I have several female like role models. I would say my mother, she's a doctor and she works really hard actually, and it's inspiring to see that being, you know, as my perspective going into university. And also, I had a mentor for my science fair project for the research detection in the racial disparities again of the detection of breast cancer. And she was a retired professor from Queen's University, and I spent some time speaking to her over the weeks about my project and just in general. And I was just amazed by everything that she knew, everything that she was saying. And just like she told me about experiences in the university and experiences in teaching classes and seeing all the different students come and go. And I was just so inspired. I felt like there's so much knowledge out there that I could find out about and everything. So
That's awesome. Mums are a great inspiration, that's for sure. Jade, would you mind telling us about any female role models that you had?
Yeah, I guess similarly, like my mom, of course. But I never actually had any family members or family friends that were engineers. So I guess this isn't an engineering related role model. But my cousin, she went to law school. And I loved how strong and independent she was. She finished law school, worked at a law firm in Halifax, and now working for the government of Nova Scotia. But I was really inspired by her, and there's an age gap between us. She's in her 40s, but yeah, I was very inspired by her, independent, and she didn't necessarily, need people to assist her, and she knew what she wanted. Very strong, a great work ethic. Love everything about my cousin, but having her there and doing a career, I guess, because maybe in law school there aren't as many female lawyers. I guess at her time, but that's something else that we sometimes face in engineering. There's not a lot of female engineering students and female engineers, so I guess we kind of connected on that. But yeah, she definitely inspired me to pursue, I guess, engineering or a STEM-related career, and she still inspires me today. So I'm very proud to have her in the family.
Yeah. I'm sure lawyers and engineers share more than a few qualities, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I have a third question here. And again, I'm going to start with Tyra, and then I'll go to Jade and then Amina. And it is, do you feel that there is a need or responsibility for students to do some catch up due to the lack of hands-on experience during the last 2 years? Tyra first, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I do feel like there is a certain like catch up that has to be done. But I think that in the way that we do it in our schools is that like because we're all in the same place, it's like you're not being left behind or anything. So it doesn't really feel like you're catching up. It feels more than it's just like, we're doing what we should have done before, but we're doing it all together. So I don't think that like it's really like a bad thing at all. I think it's a good thing that we're all kind of in this together to, replace all the experiences that we lost over the past 2 years. So.
Great answer. Thank you. And I'll pose the same question to Jade. Oh, go ahead, Jade.
I guess in my case, in some cases, yeah, I do think that there might be a little bit of catch up. So in your courses, there are a continuation in courses, and if you feel like you didn't learn as much or you weren't able to, learn a course as well as you wanted to, and you do the continuation of the course, sometimes it is you having to reread the textbook and making sure that you understand those key concepts that you gained from that previous course to then apply it and move forward in further details to that second course. And then in terms of that hands-on experience that I had mentioned during these labs, a lot of students take on these mini projects, or I guess the students that want to do that and that want to have those hands-on experience to set them apart from other students when you're applying to full-time positions or you're applying to these co-op positions. I've personally noticed a lot of people joining these design teams and having that hands-on experience through the design teams while the pandemic has gone on. So I think, there are some catch-ups you need to do, but I guess overall, another point of view would be if the entire class is also struggling as well. I don't know, I wouldn't say it's okay, but you can understand that if the entire class didn't have that hands-on learning experience, they missed those labs. We're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. So it's whether or not you as a student want to set yourself apart and want to do the extra work and put in the extra effort.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. Extracurriculars can definitely supplement where academic courses have been interrupted for the past little while, that's for sure. All right, Amina, pose the same question to you. Do you think there is a need for students to catch up for lost hands-on work?
I think learning is kind of a continuum, so I mean, catch up to what, right? I mean, I'm learning new things every day. I also, Abby, you mentioned that you took one of my courses. Sometimes when I was go into a lecture, I'd be like, I haven't taught this in a while. I gotta go read this section of the textbook. So learning is, it swings one way and it swings the other way, and it's a continuum. So sometimes you're going backwards and sometimes you're going forward. And I think to say you're catching up to something, I would just kind of say, catch up to what? So you can
as long as we're all moving forward, that's
and maybe some steps backwards just to remind yourself, of a few concepts.
Refreshers can always help. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no harm in stepping back or stepping forward or going kind of whichever direction you need to go to get where you need to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good way to put that. So I am actually going to start with you again, Amina, for my fourth question. It is, so much of engineering work is done through teamwork, which you previously referenced. Do you think the pandemic made teamwork easier or harder?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think it made it, easier in some regards. Like I think, I can't remember if it's Jade or Tyra, but like mentioned how we kind of all came together, or maybe it was you in your intro about kind of coming together, and the sort of pandemic was this kind of uniter. So I think that led to a lot of interesting kind of collaboration and teamwork opportunities where, you're trying to solve this problem as fast as you can, right? We're trying to get out of this pandemic type situation. And so you're kind of looking at it from all angles, right? You're trying to improve PPE, you're trying to improve ventilation, you're trying to sample wastewater, you're trying to make clinical tests, you're trying to make hospital times more efficient. You're trying to do all of those things. And I think everyone coming together sort of as that common goal is really, and in this kind of accelerated and really narrow focused mindset, there's not a lot of maybe problems that so many interdisciplinary are kind of converging on this one thing. And so I think that was kind of incredibly powerful for kind of pandemic response. And I think that'll really push, I mentioned measuring other public health parameters, right? Like influenza. And I think past the pandemic, we can kind of take some of these sort of groups and collaborations that we've assembled and put them toward other things. So that kind of interdisciplinary teams that we've formed can go and kind of as groups take on similar but as challenging problems, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Look at what we've been able to do. What can we tackle next, kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And we've maybe created ties that we didn't have before. It's particularly like interdisciplinary ties that you may have been kind of siloed in I'm an environmental engineer and I'm a this type of engineer, and now you've had this crosstalk and you've maybe come up with other things that your knowledge could be put together on, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So Jade, I'm going to pose the same question to you and then Tyra. So do you think that teamwork has been helped or harmed by the pandemic?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I think there was a lot of challenges in terms of teamwork because it was online school. And sometimes the students weren't necessarily in Halifax or they weren't in Atlantic time zone. So depending on how your professor created these teamwork projects or assignments, however, if you didn't select your team and you were given a team, your teammate could be in BC or another country or across the water. So you kind of had to accommodate to those time zones and all of these online meetings that you scheduled with your team. So that has definitely been a challenge, having to do that. And then as you move on to the in-person, when you're working with your team, again, if it's not necessarily the team that you selected, I'm saying in terms of COVID and the pandemic, you're being exposed to these people. So I guess having that discussion with your team as well, like in the event a teammate does test positive or they are exposed, is that team member going to be transparent and tell you, okay, guys, I've been exposed. This is my situation. So I think like that's just another challenge at times, making sure that you are transparent with your team in that sense, because that is health related. And of course you want to know. And I guess in some ways the pandemic has made it easier because you're constantly online with these online meetings, but they're very accessible to you. So now that you have your teammates online, just within a quick message on Teams or a quick message on Slack, you have your teammate available. So I guess that might be an advantage, and them being more alert, knowing that they can't contact you in person. They don't see you in class every day. So they need to be able to remember to check their Teams app, or they need to be able to remember their Slack app. So I guess that's another benefit in terms of communicating online. I guess they know that it is what it is and they need to be able to be accessible.
Yeah, that's very true. It can be great for flexibility online, but sometimes it's important to have everyone in the same place on the same page, for sure. So Tyra, I'm going to ask the same question of you. How do you think teamwork has been affected by the pandemic?
Well, sorry. I think that in terms of teamwork, it is definitely less than it was before. I think that like even like in our classrooms, like we're not really like supposed to like interact with each other like before, like last year. Now there's a bit more interaction, but I still feel like everybody's gotten like used to like working by themselves and everything. But I think that like outside of maybe like projects and everything, like studying, like in our IB diploma program, like there's a lot of work to do, like for us as like young students. So like it's best for us to like rely on each other. So I think teamwork is in like holding ourselves accountable for doing work and studying at the right time for like tests and things. I think that's like where our teamwork kind of comes into play, rather than like in a kind of project based way. But I think that actually we are kind of starting to do more like lab work in which we have to work as a team as well, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, we're slowly getting back to things for sure. Yeah. Now, my fifth question is just for a minor, and it is, do you think researching the pandemic while living through it has had different challenges than other research topics during the pandemic? So ones that weren't necessarily affected by our living conditions.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it maybe becomes sort of incredibly consuming. You're living it and researching at the same time. But I really think that really adds a sense of urgency, right? A lot of the things that we were doing, we were interested in developing a a rapid method to measure SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater. And that was like really one of the first things we did. We need a method to measure this. We need to figure out how to do that. And it creates this urgency, I guess. And throughout the pandemic, for any of the sort of pandemic response research that we did, that just, the fact that you're living it just pushes you, I think, even more, which is gives you an extra drive, I guess, on working through it.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. There's a lot of people that want you to get through and succeed in your research.
Yeah, including yourself.
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah. I guess in some ways, though, it must be sort of a relief to have something that you feel you can do to help the situation.
Definitely, yeah. I think, and I think one of the interesting things about lab work at the beginning was our labs were all sort of closed down for public health safety. But one thing that the university did say was that if you were working on pandemic response research, that could take a priority. And so we were sort of able to kind of, all our other things were on hold. And so this is how we could be in the lab, and this is how we could do what, we want to do, which we like to be in the lab. Yeah, we'd like to do research. We like to, so, okay, let's turn our attention to those kind of response measures. So yeah, it was that urgency and that feeling like you're doing something to contribute is all kind of inspiring at that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Now, we are having a lot of great questions coming in from our audience, and thank you for that. However, we only have time for one more. So I'm just going to pose this last question, and I'm going to come to a minor first again. So how do you think COVID will change education, and more specifically engineering education, long term?
Yeah, long term. I think maybe Jade touched on this. I think that there's going to be a bit more of an expectation of this sort of hybrid mode and recording things and more understanding of that not everybody's in class every day, and maybe that's not a reasonable expectation. And so having while you're maybe prepared to deliver a lecture in class, having that recording of the lecture. I mean, it's it's no more difficult for me to hit record and then post that lecture on Brightspace or whatever forum we're using to kind of share information. So I think that'll be one of the changes. I think as professors, there'll be an expectation from students and an expectation from ourselves that we're providing both that in-person mode and then all of those materials available for review again, download, and just kind of providing everything sort of both in person and some form of it in an online mode. I think that'll
more
really
accessible almost.
Yeah, and just being conscious of that sort of need and even just the extra benefit. So like we did, when we were early on, we were doing, at least for our department, a lot of our labs, we basically recorded somebody doing them. And then you ended up kind of watching a video of somebody doing the lab. And so I can see how those aids will continue to be useful while we'll have everyone in the lab doing it. When you're preparing for the lab, you could watch this actual person from Dalhousie doing it in the lab with the equipment that you have, and then you kind of know what to expect when you're going in. And so we have those materials now that we can keep using, and it's a benefit to kind of everyone, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Jade, the same question to you. How do you think the pandemic will affect engineering education in the long term?
Kind of just echoing again what was already said, but for sure, like the hybrid option. And I think when I first started university before the pandemic started, we didn't talk a lot about online classes, or at least I wasn't exposed. I didn't know that there was a lot of online class options. Only, I guess, heard about a few of them, but now that we have done online classes and students are aware that those are options, I think more students will take the opportunity to take an online class if they want to, if it's just an online class. And then again, if you're taking a class, having those pre-recorded lectures, even if it's just a professor going through a problem and having that pre-recorded. I've noticed some professors upload videos from, last year or year before that, I guess, of them working on a problem. So yeah, I find that very helpful, and I think that that's something that will stay. And I do think a lot of professors see the value in that. So I'm not 100% sure if all professors would like to do the hybrid option, because it might be a little more work for them having to do both the online and in-person version. But I think it's still great to have that for students. And then I think hopefully a lot of professors will do more in terms of labs. I always talk about the hands-on experience, and I think a lot of us lost that. So maybe after the pandemic, a lot of professors will stress on labs and how they're important, and complete more labs or add a lab component to their course, or try to have that in their course somehow. So maybe that's something that we'll see more in the future.
Yeah, for sure. The pandemic has taught us about the importance of hands-on learning. Tara, the same question to you, our last one. How do you think the pandemic will influence engineering education in the long term?
Well, I definitely think from my experiences, it has more of something to do with like remembering and the time during the pandemic in which we spent like at home, and like thinking about how we can go on and, remember that we have these things available to us now and that we shouldn't take it for granted, and how, we just have like more resources now than before than we did at the beginning of the pandemic. We can do more things and everything. So I think we just really shouldn't take that for granted going on in the future. Because I mean, I haven't had much yet experience with a lot of these things, and I hope to have it in the future. Like hearing the stories of like you guys in your higher education, like having to miss these periods of time during your undergrad and teaching. I just think that I personally wouldn't want that to be like how when I get older. So I just think that that's what's like important to me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Tyra. So thank you to all our panelists. We have Tara Oberdan, Jade Farr, and Dr. Amina Stoddard. This was a great Q&A session. We really appreciate the time that you took to speak with us this evening. And we plan to continue this conversation in other panel discussions like this. Together, we will make a difference. I'd like to say thank you to our event sponsors. Our event would not have been possible without the Dalhousie Faculty of Engineering. A special thank you goes out to Wendy Gentleman and Karen Hemsworth for helping the Dalhousie Women in Engineering Society bring this wonderful event to life. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us for this third panel discussion in our series. Please respond to the feedback forms, which will be emailed to you shortly. Those will be used to improve future experiences. We look forward to hearing your suggestions for future discussions in the series. I encourage you to visit our website, which will be posted in the chat. It's www.dalwie.com/support. And there you can learn more about upcoming initiatives. And if you're interested in supporting future panel events in the series, please consider donating on our website that's been posted in the chat. Be safe and take care, everyone.